The anime opens with a girl being escorted by 2 guards. She knows there's no escaping her fate, but she hopes they'll at least look her in the eye. Standing before her is an authority figure, who sternly states that she must understand the severity of her crime. Deceiving them is no small offense. We are then transported to the fortified city of Daya, in the kingdom of Fortuna. A girl named Nina is seen fleeing desperately from a group of soldiers, clutching a small bag. Thanks to the help of a boy named Saji, she narrowly escapes. The two arrive at a hidden hideout where they are greeted by another boy, Colin. It seems the trio has a habit of stealing from the rich from time to time. Here, we are given some backstory. 5 years ago, a plague swept through the land, killing many adults and leaving countless children orphaned. Returning to the present, it's revealed that Saji and Colin are brothers, while Nina is just a close friend. As Colin rummages through the bag, he pulls out a lapis-colored gem. Overjoyed, he compares the gem's color to Nina's striking eyes, remarking that it's a shame she has to hide them. Saji quickly jumps in, warning that if she didn't hide her eyes, trouble would soon find her, as such rare eyes are highly sought after by the rich. Despite their tough circumstances, the 3 of them seemed happy, sharing good times together. This happiness made Nina believe that their little world would last forever. However, one day, Colin fell gravely ill. Saji, clearly distressed, remarks that Colin's time has come and blames their misfortune on the star under which they were born, a fate that, in his eyes, condemned them to a life of poverty. But Nina refuses to accept this, passionately declaring that one day, they too will be rich. Saji, upset, retorts that she can say that so easily because she isn't truly one of them. This infuriates Nina, who, determined to do something to change their situation, leaves in a hurry. Staring at her reflection in the water, Nina wonders why she was born with such different eyes. It leads her to the painful realization that she has always been alone. Still, deep down, she wishes there was someone who saw her as special, someone to whom she truly mattered. The scene shifts to a cliff, where a carriage has fallen. One of the hooded men wonders if the princess could have survived the fall. His companion dismisses the idea, declaring it impossible. They decide to cover up the incident and quickly search for a replacement. We return to Saji and Nina. He apologizes for his earlier outburst, and Nina does the same. Saji then asks her to accompany him somewhere. Upon arriving at a small house, Saji quickly says goodbye, and Nina suddenly realizes what's happening. Moments later, a group of hooded men enters. Nina has been betrayed. Confused and heartbroken, Nina wonders if Saji's actions were driven by anger, or if he simply couldn't handle Colin's condition. All she knows is that her heart aches, and she feels like giving up. One of the hooded men inspects Nina's eyes, ensuring that what he's been told is true. Nina, in turn, looks into his eyes, which glow a wild golden color. Noticing her disheveled state and ragged clothes, the golden-eyed man orders his companions to change her. When they attempt to do so, they tear her clothes, revealing that Nina is, in fact, a girl. Rather than being troubled by this revelation, the men are relieved. It simplifies things, as they no longer need to disguise a boy as a girl or search for another replacement. The man with the golden eyes approaches Nina and tells her that today marks the end of her old life. From this moment forward, she will be reborn as a princess. Time passes, and the scene shifts to a grand house. A pair of women are chasing a girl through the halls, who is frantically trying to escape. She stumbles over her dress, causing a commotion that draws the attention of the man with the golden eyes, whom they call Azure. He watches with a faint sense of recognition, realizing that the noisy girl, now transformed, is none other than the orphan from before. Without hesitation, Azure orders Nina to kneel. From this point on, he declares, she must obey him without question. Her new role is to impersonate Princess Alicia, the revered priestess with lapis lazuli eyes, a blue as deep as the god of the stars. For the next 3 months, she will be trained in the ways of royalty, learning etiquette and elegance, preparing to marry the crown prince of Galgada, heir to the throne. But there's one condition: she must not let anyone discover her true identity. However, Nina is far from compliant. In a flash, she disarms Azure, snatching his sword and pointing it at him. Demanding answers, she insists he tell her who he really is, warning that unless he does, she will refuse to follow his orders and return to her previous life. Unfazed by her defiance, Azure coldly asks if she even has a home to return to, calling her a poor thing. Despite his harsh words, he understands her frustration and offers a soft apology for treating her so harshly. He then introduces himself as Azure Seth Fortuna, second prince of the kingdom of Fortuna and her master. He will be responsible for her instruction over the next 3 months. As the lessons begin, they focus on basic phrases she'll need to address the king and the nobles. However, Nina quickly becomes overwhelmed. She confesses that she doubts her ability to learn so quickly, admitting she can neither read nor write. Azure responds firmly, stressing that time is of the essence. They have an audience with the king in just 3 days. Nina begins to doubt whether she can truly deceive the king and wonders if she truly resembles the princess. The maids and even Azure reassure her that the only feature she shares with Princess Alicia is her striking, lapis-colored eyes. The story delves into Princess Alicia's background, revealing that she was the daughter of the late third queen and was named a star priestess at birth. She was raised in the Imperial Star Village, where every priestess debuts during the first Star Festival after turning 16. Nina recalls attending this festival as a child with her parents, and also remembers going with Saji and Colin the previous year. Azure interrupts her thoughts, asking if she understands the gravity of the situation, but Nina seems distant. Sensing her hesitation, Azure promises to give her anything she desires if she succeeds in the upcoming audience with the king. Encouraged by the maid's pleas, Nina reluctantly agrees, though her struggles and self-doubt make her consider giving up. A maid suggests to Azure that Nina might benefit from a change of scenery, so he takes her to the top of a castle tower. There, Nina realizes she is indeed in the royal castle. As they stand together, she notices how nice Azure smells and wonders if all nobles smell that way, making her reflect on the stark differences between their lives. When the day of the audience arrives, Nina looks composed. The maids anxiously remind her that if she makes a mistake and is discovered, it will be disastrous for all of them. As Nina enters the king's grand hall, surrounded by nobles, she bows deeply. The king, seeing her nervousness, gently tells her to relax and raise her head. Here, it's revealed that the king is Alicia's father, or at least, he believes Nina to be his daughter. Shocked by her striking eyes, the king apologizes for summoning her back to the palace for political matters. Nina, trembling with nerves, simply thanks him for his kindness. The king then turns to Azure, expressing gratitude for his help, to which Azure assures that he will handle everything until the wedding day. The queen steps in, suggesting that as part of their country's coming-of-age ceremony, the star priestess traditionally performs a dance. She asks if Princess Alicia might offer such a dance to Prince Muhulum, despite his young age. Though the prince is still far from his own coming-of-age ceremony, the queen persists in her request. Nina feels trapped, panicking as she realizes she knows nothing about the dance. The king agrees with the queen's request, but Azure quickly intervenes, explaining that it wouldn't be appropriate since the princess has not yet inherited the star rituals, nor is she of age. Moreover, Prince Muhulum is bedridden, and forcing the ritual would dishonor him. Relieved yet feeling she has failed, Nina contemplates leaving. However, she remembers what happened with Saji and wonders if she has anywhere to return to. Suddenly, a small commotion breaks out outside the hall. The queen, frustrated, demands to take Alicia, but Azure firmly refuses. Infuriated, the queen accuses Azure of trying to position himself as the rightful heir since he is the son of the king's primary wife. In a fit of spite, she throws her fan into a nearby pond and orders Azure to retrieve it. Azure calmly replies that he will get her a new fan, but the queen insists. Unable to hold back, Nina impulsively jumps into the pond to fetch the fan, splashing the queen in the process. Soaked and enraged, the queen tries to strike Nina, but Azure steps between them, smiling as he quips that it is, after all, a perfect day for a swim. The queen curses Azure's name, but he takes the chance to swiftly escape with Nina. Once they are inside, Nina apologizes, admitting she only wanted to get the queen wet. This amuses Azure, though he manages to stifle his laughter. Nina also apologizes for what she perceives as her failure during the audience, but Azure reassures her that everything went as expected and is glad it was so simple. Remembering his promise, Azure asks Nina what she wishes as a reward. After thinking for a moment, Nina asks for something simple, to be congratulated in a genuine way. A maid advises Azure to be kind to her, noting that Nina must feel very lonely. Azure tosses a towel at Nina before gently placing his hand on her head and offering her a heartfelt congratulations. Elsewhere, a shadowy figure speaks cryptically about Princess Alicia, muttering that more investigation is needed soon. The Star Festival is celebrated once a year and is a harvest festival. Everyone shows their gratitude by praying to the star god and decorating their doors with lanterns, each with a person's wish. While one of the maids asks about Alicia, another replies that she had a headache and went to bed. As a precaution, they decide to keep an eye on the door to make sure she doesn't sneak out. However, this is all part of Nina's plan as she is already sneaking out the window. Unfortunately for her, a boy spots her and mistakes her for a burglar, causing Nina to panic and fall to the ground. Nina then asks the boy his name. Irritated that she doesn't know who he is, the boy reveals that he is the crown prince, Muhulum Seth Fortna. Nina finds it hard to believe that this little boy is the crown prince, as he looks younger than the golden-eyed prince. The young prince offers to take her anywhere she wants, since as the future king, there is no place he doesn't know. Nina, barely paying attention to him, starts thinking about how she is now taking the place of the late Alicia. She then asks the prince to tell her the weak point of the evil, golden-eyed prince. Meanwhile, Azure is practicing with his sword, showing great skill. At the same time, Nina and Muhulum spy on him. Some soldiers mention that Prince Muhulum doesn't like sword training, but the boy excuses himself by saying that it's because his brother will protect him. Nina thinks that Muhulum might hate his brother because he is always praised, which might make him angry. The young prince mentions that there are things that his brother is not good at, which excites Nina. She quickly urges him to find those things so that the golden-eyed prince will have to admit defeat. However, it seems that someone is watching them. When they reach what appears to be Azure's room, Nina comments that it feels like a different world, making her wonder what Azure thinks when he's here. Muhulum mentions that his brother is amazing, having led his own army at the age of 17. Just then, Azure arrives, and despite her attempts to hide, he spots them. Azure asks Nina how long she'll continue to act like a child, and tells the young prince that he must not behave inappropriately. Muhulum, irritated, warns her not to speak to the future king like that, and runs off. Annoyed, Nina blames herself and chases after him. The prince ends up standing on some wooden planks covering a well, but they can't hold his weight, and he falls. Nina jumps in to save him, and they both end up inside the well. Muhulum becomes disheartened, thinking that no one will come to help them, but Nina assures him that everyone must be looking for him since he's the future prince. Muhulum, more serious now, reveals that perhaps only his mother is worried, as everyone thinks his brother should be the heir. Nina realizes that Muhulum actually admires his older brother and looks for his weakness just to get closer to him. She encourages him to get closer to his brother so that he can learn from him, since she also believes in him now. Suddenly, the water in the well starts to rise and they both start calling for help, but no one listens to them. It's already nighttime, and Muhulum apologizes to Nina, who, exhausted, carries him. Muhulum calls her sister, which makes her smile. Just then, Azure arrives to rescue them. After getting the prince out, it's Nina's turn, but because of the cold, she can't move anymore. Azure realizes this and lifts her up with one arm to get her out. Nina realizes that Azure isn't a bad person. After all, if he was, his little brother wouldn't care so much about him. Once outside, the young prince asks Azure to train him personally. Surprised, Azure looks at Nina, who nods at him. He finally agrees to train his brother, warning him that he will be very strict. Muhulum is relieved, as he thought his brother would reject him. On the way back, Nina takes the opportunity to ask Azure if there is anything he is bad at. He replies that there is nothing in particular, but that he does not like things that are amorphous. Nina does not understand and assumes that he is talking about ghosts. Elsewhere, mysterious figures discuss the real Alicia and question who Nina really is. The next day, Nina and Azure argue again. The maids comment that they seem to be getting along better every day. Azure mentions that the festival is coming up soon, and Nina wonders if it is celebrated inside the palace as well. Azure assures her that she no longer has to do anything related to her former religious life. He then hands her a lantern and tells her that even royalty can make wishes. The king and queen approach, and the queen jokingly says that she hopes they are not asking for the throne. The king regrets that he cannot witness Alicia's priestly ritual, though he is glad that she can enjoy the festival. Seeing this, Nina thinks that the king is a good person. An older man, one of those accompanying the king, asks if he could at least delight them with a dance. However, Nina ignores him, wondering who that man thinks he is. They both continue on their way. Nina comments that the queen is as impertinent as ever, so she doesn't like her. Azure, however, replies that he appreciates that quality because with people like her, you already know what to expect. On the contrary, those who complicate everything are those who are the complete opposite. What he really means is that not everyone is as simple as Nina. Although this seems like an insult, it is actually a small compliment. Nina notices that Azure is not carrying a lantern, so she asks him why. He replies that he doesn't need one because he has no wishes to make. Later, Nina meets with Muhulum, who tells her that he didn't want the day of the festival to come because in a month and a half after it ends, he'll have to leave to get married. Nina nods but assures her that they can visit each other. However, Muhulum interrupts her to tell her that Galgada, their neighboring country, lies beyond some rugged mountains. By land, the journey requires a major detour, and by sea, The distance is also considerable, possibly taking weeks to reach. He further tells us that Galgada began to invade the southern lands mercilessly, showing that the crown prince of Galgada is terrifying, and if his grandfather hadn't been bedridden, they might have done something. Muhulam thinks that he should use his wish to prevent Nina's marriage. As Nina ponders Galgada, the old man from before approaches her again, suggesting that even royalty can secretly sneak into the city. He seems to be hinting at a way for her to escape unnoticed, saying that no one would detect her absence. Just then, the maids arrive, concerned about the man's proximity to her. After the incident, Nina begins to seriously consider running away, and the day of the festival finally arrives. During the celebration, it seems that some people are plotting against her, as one of them mentions that they will take care of her. Azure is now questioning the maids about Nina's whereabouts, as she is missing. One of them mentions that she has noticed that Nina has been distracted lately and has been visiting the temple within the castle walls. Interestingly, from the temple, the village is accessible. Nina successfully escapes from the castle and is relieved, thinking that no one noticed her absence. She begins to run, remembering her parents, who would welcome her and ask her about her wish. She also remembers that her parents told her that the star god has eyes of the same color as hers, but that she should keep them hidden until she is an adult. She also remembers Saji and Colin and how they spent the day of the festival together. Nina arrives at what was once her home, but soon realizes that there is nothing left. At that moment, he realizes that the Nina he once knew no longer exists. Just then, Azure arrives, having caught up with her. Nina confronts him and blames him for the fact that she has nothing left, crying as she realizes that the life she lived as Nina has vanished. She also laments that she will have to travel to a faraway country where no one knows who Nina is. Azure seems to remember something similar from his own childhood. Suddenly, he senses another presence and reacts quickly, neutralizing a group of men who had been following them. However, when he is distracted by the sight of Nina in danger, he is injured. Despite this, he manages to recover and exposes the perpetrator of the attack, the old man who had tricked Nina. Before Azure can finish him off, the old man accuses him of being a usurper. Nina notices that Azure is injured and tells him that it is all his fault. However, Azure tells her that it is not his fault, as there are many people in the palace who see him as a threat and want to eliminate him. Azure tells Nina to leave, saying that he won't chase her anymore. Nina wonders if she won't get into trouble later, but he tells her that he'll find a solution. She rips a piece of cloth to bandage his wound and reminds him that he told her that he needed her, so she shouldn't keep dwelling on it. Nina tells him that she's always had someone to call her by her name, so she forgives him and is willing to die if he asks her to. Azure tells her that he knows perfectly well that she's not Alicia, and from now on, when they're alone, he'll call her by her real name, Nina, while hugging her. In her thoughts, Nina makes a wish to the god of the stars, that she can at least count on one person. She still has a month and a half left for her trip, but right now she doesn't know why her heart hurts so much. Nina rides a horse while Azure watches her from a distance. He comments that Nina learns quickly when she doesn't overthink things. After dismounting, Nina cheerfully remarks that horse riding is a lot of fun and that she already wants to do it again. However, her tone suddenly shifts to a more serious one as she asks if he was saying something bad about her. Azure immediately acknowledges her sharp hearing, but warns her that she can't keep riding because something dangerous might happen. Nina wonders if he's referring to the incident from the other day. She also suspects that the man they encountered earlier was likely one of the queen's subordinates and had attacked them, thinking Azure was an imposter. Azure, however, brushes it off and tells her to forget the whole thing. Realizing that Didas is no longer around and that they are now alone, Nina starts behaving a bit oddly, but all she really wants is for Azure to call her by her name, Nina. Nina then notices something in his hands and asks about it. One of the maids explains that they are fita ribbons, which are currently fashionable among the ladies of the court. These ribbons are traditional amulets from the southern lands, woven with wishes or prayers, though most ladies weave them for the men they love. When Nina recalls Azure's face, she becomes flustered. She quickly tries to shake off the thought, reminding herself that she's soon to be married, but this only makes her feel more conflicted and ends up leaving her even more distressed. Later, the two of them go out riding. Noticing that the reins on Nina's horse are worn, Azure decides they should ride together, explaining that she isn't quite ready to ride on her own yet. Nina, clearly nervous, feels embarrassed as Azure urges her to come a little closer. When they reach a cliff, Nina is awestruck by the stunning view, able to see all the way to the horizon. She spots a red house in the distance and asks what it is. Azure tells her that it's the royal family's villa, where the former king resides. That man, Azure's great-grandfather, laid the foundation for the country's prosperity and is, in many ways, more significant than the current king. Azure adds that he lived with him from the age of 4, and over the next 10 years, his great-grandfather taught him many things. While there were times Azure resented him, he also holds great admiration for him. Nina realizes this is the first time Azure has spoken about himself, and it's clear his great-grandfather meant a lot to him. Now she begins to wonder what Azure thinks of her. Confused, Nina isn't sure how she truly feels about him. After finishing her fita ribbon, Nina goes to find Azure and overhears him talking about the worn reins on his horse. She immediately grows concerned. It seems like things are getting worse each day, and if this continues, even Didas might not be able to protect him. Perhaps they should inform the former king. But Azure dismisses the idea, saying he hopes nothing will happen. Still, he knows that if it's for the good of the country and the will of the people, his elimination will be inevitable. After all, it is the fate dictated by the star under which he was born. Nina, who has heard everything, storms into the room in a rage. She tells Azure that she hates the idea of being tied to the fate of a star, upset that Azure seems to think it's acceptable for people to want to take her life. If she knows she's in danger, she should do something about it. Azure, however, calmly replies that if she were to lose her life, she would accept it, as her life is worth far less than Nina imagines. Shocked and unable to comprehend what she's hearing, Nina wonders why Azure is so willing to put up with this, and for what purpose. Azure then tells Nina not to worry about matters that don't concern her, and to focus on fulfilling her own role. Furious, Nina throws the ribbon at her and tells Azure not to use her name when they're not alone. She then storms out of the room. On her way back, still muttering curses under her breath, Nina is intercepted by the king, who seems somewhat worried. He asks her if it's true that she left the festival early because she wasn't feeling well. Nina briefly considers telling him about Azure, but knowing that the queen is involved, she decides to remain silent. She wonders if anyone has the power to help Azure and begins to feel desperate. Determined to find a solution, Nina hurriedly grabs a horse, intending to see the former king. Still inexperienced in riding, however, she falls off but quickly recovers. Apologizing to the horse, she promises not to scare it again and manages to make her way to the former king's villa. Upon her arrival, the former king is surprised to see her arrive without requesting an audience. Nina introduces herself as Alicia and, with great respect, makes a request to spare Prince Azure's life. She tells him about the events of the festival night, the horse's reins, and her suspicion that the queen is behind it all, likely seeking to seize the throne. The former king asks if Azure asked her to speak, but Nina assures him that he hasn't, that he's acting on his own. The former king, who already suspected this, comments that Azure always had a gift. When he taught her one thing, Azure learned 10. He grew up to become one of the pillars of the nation. In other words, if Azure hasn't decided to act, it's because he believes it's for the best. Nina, still uneasy, asks if the former king wants Azure dead. Instead of answering, he beckons Nina over. Realizing that she's not really Alicia, he orders her arrest, stating that anyone who grew up in Star Village would never set foot in the star emblem. He orders everything she's carrying to be confiscated and that she's thrown into the dungeon. Later, Phonem reports to the former king on Nina's situation. To their surprise, she's not crying like they expected. Instead, she's humming to herself. Back in the dungeon, Nina comments that she thought it would be a scary place, but it actually reminds her a lot of home. However, that's not her goal right now. What matters is making sure Azure forgives everyone else because she was the one who made the mistake. Plus, she still needs to convince them to protect Azure. To do that, she decides she needs to improve the king's opinion of her, so she quickly begins clearing out the dungeon. Hearing this, the former king orders her to be scared a bit. Phonem approaches Nina and informs her that she'll be getting 100 lashes the next day. Instead of panicking, though, Nina simply thinks they're being generous. At least she's not going to be beheaded. The next day, Nina stands before the king again, fully aware that this may be her last chance to convince him. The first thing she says, even before apologizing, is that he must protect Prince Azure. She promises to accept any punishment necessary in exchange for him sparing the others, as they are good people. The king asks why she wants to sacrifice herself for them, especially since they used her in the end. But Nina responds that they gave her a place in this world, and when you live with someone, they become your family. The former king, visibly pleased, remarks that he no longer has the power to stop the queen. Furthermore, his legs are now rotting from poison, which will slowly spread to his heart and end his life. However, though he cannot do anything, Alicia can, as she is in a position of great power. It turns out that the one who agreed to her engagement with Galgata is his grandson, the current king. This is a grave mistake, because Galgada is only looking for an excuse to invade Forna, despite their good relations. That's why they asked for something as impossible as the betrothal of the priestess princess. If Forna refused, they would attack, using the broken engagement as an excuse. Even if Nina were to go through with the marriage, they would still find a way to blame her for something and invade anyway. Nina thinks that what she's doing doesn't make any sense, but the former king tells her that normally she'd be right. However, if Alicia has courage and determination, she will be able to protect Azure. Nina doesn't understand what he means, so she asks him to explain, but he tells her to figure it out for herself, because if she continues being a fool, she won't be able to protect anyone. At that moment, Azure appears. The king tells Azure that this girl came to ask him to save his life, but Azure responds that it was all his idea, so she is not at fault. The king remains calm and tells Azure that he and his 2 guards are the only ones who know what happened, so there won't be any issues. He asks them to calm down and rest there for the night, and that the next day they will return together. The former king mentions that he hasn't felt this good in a long time. Azure and Nina leave, while the king notices Didas's presence and quickly calls him over. He remarks that this imposter girl is a very peculiar element and will likely become the wind that drives Azure forward. Later, Nina and Azure are looking up at the sky. Azure mentions that from there, they can see the western lands, a place very dear to him. Nina notices that he doesn't sound angry, just tired, and wonders if he was worried about her. She then apologizes and quickly tells Azure that he and his great-grandfather have the same eyes. She had always found it strange that he didn't resemble the king, but now she can see that he resembles his great-grandfather. Azure reveals that he doesn't have royal blood. Just like her, he is an imposter, a stand-in for a deceased prince. He was switched with the prince when he was a child, and only the king, the former king, and a few others know about it. Not even the queen, who comes from another country, knows. A small flashback shows how the former king took care of Azure, raising him in his villa from a young age. From that point on, Azure devoted himself to the country, giving up on wanting anything for himself, as he was destined to live his life that way. We see him grow up to the birth of the other prince, making it clear that he was never to want anything for himself, as his only purpose was to serve as an advisor to the king. Therefore, it would not have been strange if, after Muhulim was born, he had been eliminated. Here, Azure reveals that the real reason for finding a replacement for Alicia was to get rid of him, whether the replacement was male or female. As long as they had the same eyes, they would perish before Galgada could discover them. This was the best way to prevent Galgada from finding an excuse to have the replacement die due to his negligence. However, Nina turned out not to be just a pawn, as the day before, Azure couldn't stop thinking about what he would do if something happened to her. He couldn't bear to lose her smile through tears, as she is one of a kind, and he would never let her die. Nina tells him that he shouldn't die either, as it is insane for him to think he deserves it just because he is not the true prince. Even if Muhulim becomes king, Azure could still support the country. Azure replies that it could cause a lot of discord, even if that is not his intention. If others wished for it, it could lead to serious conflict. Nina refuses to accept this, and tells him that if he were to leave, there would be no one to call her by her name, so she doesn't want anyone else to. If he doesn't, then it means nothing. She doesn't care that he isn't a prince, because to her at least, he is one of a kind. At this, Azure stares at Nina and recites the following: "A blue like the dawn, and the one whom those eyes look upon so honestly is not the prince or anyone else." Never before in his life had he wanted something for himself, and suddenly, he takes her in his arms and on impulse decides to kiss her. After what happened, he says that it was just a dream, so he takes Nina to his room. However, she, full of joy, knows that it was not just a dream.